I was never ill. Not once. Understand that first, because everything after it depends on it. In March 1907, a man I had never met walked into the kitchen where I worked, on Park Avenue, and told me that I was carrying a fever inside me and giving it to the people I cooked for. He wanted my urine. He wanted my blood. He wanted my stool. He said this to a woman in the middle of her working day, standing over her own stove, and he expected her to fetch it for him. His name was George Soper. He was a sanitary engineer, not a doctor. He had been hired the previous winter by the owner of a house in Oyster Bay, on Long Island, where 6 of 11 people in a rented summer household had come down with typhoid fever. He worked backwards through the employment agencies. He found a pattern. A cook, hired, then fever in the house, then the cook gone, before anyone thought to look at her. Mamaroneck in 1900. Manhattan. Maine. Sands Point. And then Park Avenue, where 2 people had already taken ill. One of them the daughter of the house. He was right about the pattern. I want to be honest about that, because I spent 30 years being told I was a liar, and I will not become one now to make the story easier. But consider what he was asking. In 1907, the idea of a healthy carrier, a person who holds a disease and is not touched by it, was 5 years old and barely out of the German laboratories. Nobody had explained it to me. Nobody explained it to me that day either. A stranger came into my workplace and told me my body was manufacturing a fever that I could not feel, could not see, and could not stop, and asked me to prove it by handing him samples in a jar. I picked up a carving fork and I put him out of my kitchen. I have read since that this proves what kind of woman I was. They came back with the police. I went out through a kitchen window. I went over a fence. They found me some hours later in a closet in a neighboring house, and Dr. Josephine Baker of the New York City Health Department, who wrote about it afterwards, so you need not take my word, held me down in the ambulance the whole way because there was no other way to keep me in it. That was the 19th of March, 1907. I reached the detention hospital that day. Some records put the formal order the following morning. It hardly matters. From that afternoon, I was no longer a person who had been accused of something. I was a specimen in transit. I want to be exact about the charge, because there wasn't one. I had committed no crime. There was no trial, no counsel, no hearing. I was moved under a section of the Sanitary Code that let the department detain a person believed to be a danger to public health, and the belief was sufficient. Within weeks, I was on North Brother Island, in the East River, off the Bronx shore. 13 acres, a hospital for infectious disease, and a small bungalow that became mine. I could see Manhattan from it. I could see the ferries. That is the part nobody writes down. It was not a wilderness. It was 20 minutes from the kitchen I had been working in, and I could watch it every day for the rest of my life. Between March 1907 and June 1909, the health department took 163 specimens from my body. That is the figure in their own records. More than one a week, for 2 years and 3 months. Most came back positive. Some did not. That inconsistency is not my invention. It is theirs, in their ledgers. So I did something they did not expect. I paid, out of what money I had, to send my own samples to a private laboratory, Ferguson Laboratories, in Manhattan. I sent them for nearly a year. Every single one came back negative. Every one. I am not going to stand here and tell you the Ferguson results were right and the cities were wrong. I do not know. Typhoid is shed in bursts. A carrier can test clean 1 week and not the next, and the science of 1909 could not settle between 2 laboratories with opposite answers. That is precisely the point I want to leave you holding. 2 laboratories. 2 answers. One of them belonged to the institution that was already holding me, and its results were treated as fact. Mine were treated as the excuses of a difficult woman. In June 1909, a newspaper printed my name and a drawing of me dropping skulls into a frying pan, and the phrase that has outlived everything else about me. That same month, a lawyer petitioned for my release. I wrote to him. I still know what I wrote, because it survives. I wrote that I had been made a peep show for everybody, that even the interns came to look at me and ask about facts already known to the whole wide world, that the men from the tuberculosis pavilion would point and say, "There she is, the kidnapped woman." The court heard the city's cultures. The court heard about Ferguson. The court found that my detention was lawful because I was a danger to the public health, and returned me to the island. I do not say the judge was wicked. I say that the question in front of him was whether the state may hold a healthy person indefinitely, without charge, on the strength of what her body might do, and that the answer given in 1909 has never been properly revisited by anyone who was not writing about me. They offered me a way out, once. They offered to take out my gallbladder, where they believed the bacteria were living. In 1909, that operation killed a meaningful share of the people who had it. I said no. I have been called unreasonable for that too. In February 1910, a new health commissioner let me go. The terms were written down. I would never work as a cook again, and I would report to the department every 3 months. I signed. I meant it when I signed it. Now, what work was I released into? I was a 40-year-old immigrant woman whose trade was cooking, whose name had been in every newspaper in New York, and who had been forbidden the only skilled work she had. They set me to laundry. It paid a fraction of what a cook earned. I went back to kitchens. I used the name Mrs. Brown. In early 1915, there was an outbreak of typhoid at the Sloane Maternity Hospital in Manhattan. 25 people took ill. 2 died. The cook had been working there under the name Brown. I will not stand here and dress that up. Whatever was done to me before that, the people in that hospital had done nothing to me, and I put them at risk knowingly because I had been told what I was and I went back anyway. That is mine. I carry it. The sanitary police took me on the 27th of March, 1915, and this time nobody discussed terms. I lived on North Brother Island for 23 more years. I was eventually given work in the hospital laboratory, which has its own bleak humor. A woman who had been reduced to specimens spending her afternoons handling other people's. On Christmas morning 1932, I had a stroke and never walked again. I died on the 11th of November 1938 of pneumonia. 9 people came to the funeral. Here is the number I would like left standing after everything else in this episode has faded. By the time I died, the New York City Health Department's register of known healthy typhoid carriers held more than 400 names. Some of them worked in food. In 1924, a Brooklyn bakery owner named Alphonse Catilles was arrested for handling food after being warned not to. He was a carrier, exactly as I was. He was given a suspended sentence and released on his promise to conduct his business by telephone. He went home, I did not. 51 cases of typhoid and 3 deaths were traced to me directly. Other counts run to 53 or 57. Those are real people, and I am not asking you to set them aside. I am asking you why, out of 400, the city built a house for one.